Hey y'all, how's it going? Today we're going to be trying something a bit different. Instead of the usual fixed-wing aircraft reviews I've been doing, today we're going to be taking a look at a rotary-wing aircraft, or they're also known as helicopters. Specifically, we're going to be taking a look at the Mi-24P found in the Russian tech tree, my current favorite helicopter in War Thunder. So let's dive in and see what this beast of a helicopter has in store. Development of the Mi-24P began in the mid-1970s when designers at the Mill Bureau were asked to add more firepower to the helicopter. The designers then looked to the GSH-30-2 equipped to the Su-25. They used the Mi-24V as a base and then removed the Yak-B 12.7mm 4-barrel Gatling gun and then fixed the 30mm on the right-hand side of the helicopter. Initially, the barrels ended next to the weapons system officer's cockpit, and during firing tests, the gun blast would damage the ATGM sight, disorientate the Wizzo, and affect the trim of the helicopter. The designers at Mill then approached the gun's designer, who offered to extend the gun's barrel by 1 meter. Still, this didn't extend the gun past the fuselage, so designers at Mill created barrel extensions to push the gun that little bit further to get it past the nose of the aircraft. A special bracket had to also be designed as the barrels could now flex. With these final modifications, the cannon was stable. Production of the Mi-24P began in 1981 and lasted until 1989, with a total of 620 of the type being built during this time frame. The 24P would see heavy use during the Soviet-Afghan War alongside other Mi-24 variants. Despite being able to carry troops, Mi-24 pilots preferred not to carry them to keep the helicopter lighter and more agile. Instead, they were primarily used as attack helicopters. Mi-24s would provide close air support to infantry units, escort Mi-8s carrying troops, escort convoys, cover transport aircraft landing in Kabul, and would be sent out on hunter-killer missions. These hunter-killer missions would see a minimum of a pair of Mi-24s, but usually groups of 4 or 8 sweeping an area of anything they could find. Early on in the war, Mi-24s had pretty much free reign over the battlefields. Things changed when the US began supplying Stinger manpads to the Mujahideen. Mi-24s would switch from flying high altitude to flying at treetop levels, only shortly popping up to fire weapons before dropping back down. It wasn't just the rebels the Russian pilots had to worry about either, but also the climate. The high ground altitude, hot weather, and dust wreaked havoc on the machinery. To deal with all these threats, the Hinds would be upgraded with air filters, flare pods, IR dazzlers, night vision devices, and air ducts to direct the exhaust gas into the rotor wash, just to name a few. Despite all these upgrades, as many as 127 Mi-24s were shot down during the war. Following the war, the Mi-24 would continue to serve in the Russian army despite newer helicopters coming into service. In War Thunder, instead of using a radar to find targets like with jets, you'll be using the Raduga SH. This is the optic that is used to guide the Sturm ATGM. The optic has a 15 times zoom setting to help spot tanks several miles away. The sight doesn't have any night vision, so it'll be hard to use during night battles. To help aim your other weapons, you have CCIP for both your guns and your unguided rockets. For defensive avionics, the helicopter gets access to engine exhaust ducts at rank 1, 192 countermeasures at rank 2, an IR dazzler at rank 3, and the SPO-15 RWR. The SPO-15 is a good RWR that'll give you the direction you are being locked from within about 10 degrees. For air-to-ground, you get access to the 250 and 500 kilogram dumb bombs, the S-8KO unguided rocket pods, the S-24B unguided rocket, and the 9M114 Sturm ATGM. The Russian helicopters are the only ones capable of equipping bombs, though it'll take some practice to aim these as the Hind doesn't get a ballistics computer for them. You get access to the S-8KO unguided rocket pod stock. This is an 80mm rocket that can reach a speed up to 650 meters per second, has a heat warhead that can pin 420mm of flat armor at any range, and comes in rocket pods that holds up to 20 rockets each. It's a good rocket for spamming down light armored vehicles and tanks, but will struggle against anything with composite armor or ERA. The rocket also has pretty good post pin with a wide cone of destruction. At rank 1 you can unlock the S-24B. This is a 240mm high explosive rocket with a 25.5 kilogram warhead. The rocket can reach a speed up to 410 meters per second and is very accurate over long range. If you switch to the cockpit view and then use the switch sight mode in cockpit keybind to cycle to the rocket setting, you can hit stationary targets over 2 miles away with this rocket. A near miss is all you need to kill any light armored target or SPAA, while you'll need a direct hit to kill most MBTs. This is a good weapon, but suffers from lack of loadout options, so I don't end up using it that much. At rank 3, you unlock the 9M114 Sturm ATGM and can equip up to 4. After researching the rank 4 modification, you can equip up to 8. The Sturm is a supersonic ATGM that can reach up to 550 meters per second and has a max range of 3.11 miles. The missile uses a SAC-LOS or semi-active command line of sight guidance system. This means that you just have to keep your crosshair centered on the target and the missile will guide itself to that target. This missile carries a single heat warhead that is capable of penetrating 560 millimeters of armor. While its penetration is a little lacking compared to other 9.7 helicopter ATGMs, it has nearly twice the speed of all those missiles and has the second longest range, with only the Mangusta's Hellfires beating it out. This missile will be your main weapon once you unlock it. The missile will one-shot any light armored vehicles like SPAs and IFVs, and if you aim it properly, you can one-shot early MBTs like the Leo 1s, Pattons, and Type 74s. Because the Sturm doesn't use a tandem warhead, it will struggle to one-shot or even pin tanks with heavy composite armor and ERA like the Abrams Challenger 1 and MX-30 Brennes from the front. For these heavy armored targets, you'll need to target their side or rear to deal real damage, and it may take 2 or 3 Sturms to kill them. For air-to-air, you get 2 types of missiles. First, you get the R60 at rank 3 and can equip 2. At rank 4, you can unlock a modification that will let you bring 4 R60s. This is the same short-range rear aspect 30G IR missile found on the Russian jets. It offers you some protection against enemy helicopters and jets. You'll have to sneak up behind them so that you can use this missile. It's very prone to flares, so shooting these at any helicopter with a missile approach warning system is just a waste of a missile. As a side grade modification at rank 4, you get the R60M. This is an R60 that gets a 1.24 mile all aspect lock range. The missile is much more effective in the self-defense role, as you can fire at people coming head-on with you. With 4 of these equipped, you're probably the best AA for the Russian 9-7 ground lineup until the short-range IRSAM like the SA-9 shows up. These missiles are still prone to flares, so if you do go aircraft hunting, try not to get noticed before firing one of these. The Mi24P is equipped with the GSH 30-2K 30mm twin-barrel cannon and a fixed mount on the right-hand side of the fuselage. The cannon comes with 250 rounds of ammunition and has 2 rate-of-fire modes. Low mode, which has a rate of fire of 300 rounds per minute, which will give you a trigger time of 50 seconds, and high mode that has a fire rate of 2,600 rounds per minute and will give you a trigger time of 5.7 seconds. While high mode does put a lot of bullets downrange quickly, the recoil can throw your aim off if you hold down the trigger for too long. While the low setting is much easier to adjust while firing, and it is what I typically use. You can swap between the two using the change rate of fire keybind. This cannon gets access to an APHE round with 60mm of pin at 100 meters and 40mm of pin at 1 kilometer against flat armor. These APHE rounds will tear light armored vehicles to shreds and can still kill tanks if you attack them from the rear or side. You also get access to up to 4 GSH-23L gun pods. Each gun pod comes with 250 rounds of ammo, and with a fire rate of 3,400 rounds per minute, you'll have about 4.4 seconds of trigger time. These gun pods are pretty worthless in the air-to-ground role, except for killing light armored SPAA, and I mean like really light armored SPAA, and that's if you somehow manage to sneak up on them. Though with 4 of them equipped, you get a pretty hilarious burst mass of 56.44 kilograms per second, so you can really ruin some planes' days if they try to head on you, but otherwise this is pretty much just a meme loadout. Stock grinding a heli is not going to be easy. You're going to start off with the S8KO unguided rocket pods and your 30mm gun. Heli PvP EC is cancer on pretty much every map thanks to KA50 spam. Though if you get the city map, you may be able to have some success by hiding in the buildings, but with the arcade spotting system, this isn't a surefire way to avoid being killed. Tank RB isn't much better as you'll be quickly killed by SPA or tank roof-mounted machine guns and cannons before you can get many kills. Personally, I suggest going into the arcade ground assault mode and grinding there until you get to the first Sturm ATGMs. It'll take some time, but it's the least painful option to stock grind a heli in my opinion, at least until we get the PvE heli EC mode. The Mi24P is powered by two Klimov TV3-117K turboshaft engines, each capable of producing 250 kilograms of force, which is about 2,200 shaft horsepower. These engines give the Hind an impressive acceleration and can get the helicopter going at 181 knots. This is one fast helicopter, and it allows you to skirt around the battlefield to get those side and rear shots on tanks. The Hind also handles fairly well given her size. At low speeds, you can duck and weave through trees at low altitude, though at high speeds she does start to become a bus, requiring you to plan your moves ahead of time. When flying at speed, the helicopter doesn't like to yaw, which can make aiming the fixed 30mm gun difficult if a target pops up at close range on you. One thing I recently found out I could do was turn off the automatic roll control. Normally, when you're flying a helicopter, it'll try to neutralize any side-to-side movement you might have after rolling the helicopter to the left or right. This makes it very hard to strafe side to side or do banking turns. By using the manual roll control keybind or going through the multifunction menu and using Y25 like I do, you can disable this auto leveling feature, giving you more control over the helicopter. You only have to do this in your first game of the day, as the change will carry over subsequent games until you log out. Now I'm going to be assuming you will be mainly playing the Mi24P and Ground RB, as you definitely need to see a psychiatrist if you main this thing in Heli EC, as there's definitely something wrong with you. Now, you can spawn the Hind right off the bat if you want to, but you're only going to have access to the S8KO unguided rocket pods. It's best to spawn a light tank like the BMP or the 2S25, or you can also spawn an MBT like the T64B. The reason for the T64B is that because it's a 9.3 tank, it'll get a similar SP cost to the 2S25 most of the time. Usually you need just one cap to get enough spawn points to spawn the Hind with Sturms, but you may need to get a few more spawn points by getting a kill/assist or by tanking a few rounds. This is where the armor on the T64B can come in handy. Russia gets some tanks that have decently reliable armor at this BR. Between the T72B, T64B, and the Terms, you have three tanks that have good protection against heat rounds thanks to their Contact 1 ERA, and their composite armor will force tanks with a 105 to aim for weak spots if they want to go through your front. Now that you have acquired the required spawn points to spawn your Hind, go ahead and select the loadout you want to take. I go back and forth between taking the 8 ATGMs and 2 rocket pod loadout and the 4 ATGM, 4 R60M, and 2 rocket pod loadout. If I'm going to be near a helipad and I'm worried about enemy air, I'll take the loadout with the R60Ms. If I'm going to be far away from the helipad, I'll take the 8 ATGM loadout so that I can stay out longer. Now that you've chosen your loadout, be sure to select Helipad 2, the closer helipad, before you spawn, as by default it'll set you to Helipad 1. The first thing you want to do after spawning is find some cover like a hill, some trees, or a building that you can drop behind to break line of sight if you start getting shot at. I like to find spots that are about no more than 2.5 miles away from the AO, as the further you are away, the harder your missile will be to guide. This is because the missile will be on low speed as it nears its max range. After finding your spot, go ahead and check the enemy tank spawn for any SPAA sitting there. You want to kill these first with your Sturms. If a gun spa radar locks you, start spamming chaff and drop into cover, and once you know where he's at, pop back up and kill him real quick. What you'll really need to worry about are IR SAMs. The Ocelot, Type 93, and PGZ-04A are your biggest threats at your BR. Their missiles outrange you and are very hard to flare off once they've been fired. The Ocelot and Type 93 also lack a radar, so your first indication they're there is usually a missile getting shoved right into your pilot's face. If one is around and you know about it, start pre-flaring like crazy and try to hit him with the Sturm before he hits you. If you're up tiered, you'll likely to face the roll-in systems with their mouse-guided SAMs, and these just flat out ignore your flares and chaff thanks to them being mouse-guided. For these, you need to use terrain to get the jump on them and get your missile off before they do. Once the SAMs are clear, you can switch to going after tanks and IFVs. Personally, I like to focus IFVs and light tanks as I can reliably one-shot them with the Sturm. If there is any tank threatening my team, then I will go for him. If you run out of Sturms early or mid-game, go ahead and RTB to reload. At this point, there are too many tanks and IFVs around. While you do have some armor, it's only effective at stopping up to 12.7mm machine guns, so IFV autocannons and the 20mm mounted on German tanks will quickly tear you apart. As the game nears its end, or it's a very large map like Red Desert, you can try to make a pass with your gun and rockets. Just try to pick an area that currently has few enemy tanks to limit the amount of fire coming your way. Try to stay around a middling speed when making these gun runs so you're still maneuverable enough to aim your weapons, but can quickly accelerate and get out of there if you start getting shot at or once you finish your run. Most of the time, this will still end with you dying, but when it works, it's very rewarding. That about covers everything, so let's go over the pros and cons before ending with my final verdict. Starting off with the pros as usual, the high speed is one of its greatest strengths over other helicopters. This allows you to quickly get to flanking positions to halt an enemy advance or change positions after you've been spotted. Being a gunship, the Mi-24P can carry a lot of ordnance and gets access to some pretty good weapons. The SAKOs are the best unguided rockets that a helicopter gets access to. The fixed 30mm may be a little hard to aim, but it packs a wallop once you do get it on target. The Sturm may not have the best pin of ATGMs at its BR, but the high speed and range give you more options for positioning yourself around the battlefield. The Hind gets a bunch of countermeasures, so feel free to run the 2 flare 1 chaff loadout, as you'll still have 64 uses, so you'll rarely be running out of flares with that many at your disposal. Moving over to the cons, the biggest downside of the Mi-24P is definitely its RP and SL cost. Just unlocking the Mi-24P will set you back nearly 940,000 RP and 2.54 million SL. And you need to get all of that with no good mode for grinding. Heli EC is currently cancer if you're playing a low tier starter heli thanks to high tier spam, and ground RB doesn't really give you a good reward. The lack of any night vision or thermals for the gunner sight doesn't help either during night battles. The flares that spawn on the battlefield can help with this some, but you will still be at a disadvantage during night battles compared to other nations' helis. With the terrible yaw ability at high speeds, aiming your fixed 30mm and rocket pods is very difficult against targets that pop up close to your helicopter. The Mi-24P is a great addition to the Russian 9.7 ground RB lineup. It provides the lineup with some good anti-air thanks to the R60Ms, and good long-range cast support with the Sturm ATGM. That is, if you can afford it. Currently, the only good way to unlock it in a reasonable amount of time is to get the KA-50 and play helicopter EC battles. If you're wanting to grind through the helicopter line using just the tech tree vehicles, it's going to be painful and long. It is definitely easier after the RP and SL cost for some of the earlier helicopters were lowered, but with no good mode to grind in right now, it was kind of a moot point. Hopefully, the Heli PvE mode that is being worked on right now will provide a mode to grind in, and maybe Gaijin will change their stance on separating Heli EC into a lower BR and higher BR matchmaking. What are your guys' thoughts on helicopters? I know a lot of tankers don't like them, but I enjoy the low and mid-tier helicopters like the Hind and the AH-1F, as their weapons aren't point and click and require some smart positioning to be effective with. So let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.